In this lesson, we're going to be showing you how to create an HTML form. HTML forms are an essential part of web development, and forms are a great way to initiate that communication between your web user and giving them ability to send you information via a form. So these are essential part of web development, and in order to create a form, we're going to use our HTML tags here. So it's just form and opening and closing form. So this creates that initial form element. So I've got that in here, and now we need to create what we want to do within the form. So we've got our form element, our form container all ready to go. Make sure when you are creating those form containers that you're not crossing over different elements. So if we've got something like that, this isn't going to be correct because we can't have opening an element inside of another one before it's closed and so on. So make sure that you are nesting them properly. So let's go back into the form and create an input. And when it comes to inputs, there are several different types of inputs. So you need to specify what type of input you want to make it. So typically, most commonly, we're going to be using a text input, and then we can close that off. And we see that what that does is that creates an input field, and this allows a space for the user to input some information. Now there's quite a few other attributes that we should add in, such as ID in order to identify it. So maybe this could be a first name field, and we also name it. And naming it allows us to pick it up on the server end. So that could pick up that form information when it gets submitted and pick that up on the server end. There's also a bunch of other attributes that we can add, such as placeholder. And this creates that grayed out type area, and this is visible by the user. So when I save this, we can see that we get this grayed out. So that's the placeholder that's allowing us to do that. Now if you notice that by default we don't have anything here that's specifying what we're expecting within this form field. If we do use placeholder, then that gives the user a little bit better of an idea. But let's say we want to really be specific on what type of information we want to create here. I'm actually going to get rid of this right now for now because it's getting in the way of looking at the form. So I'm going to also get rid of this header area here so that all we have is the form content. Now forms are going to be similar. It's going to be created in a similar fashion as you would any other HTML section, where you're breaking apart pieces of the content and sectioning it off in different containers. So you can use everything from a paragraph here to break apart the different input fields here, and then of course we can label it and we can name it and so on. There's a number of different ways to accomplish that as well. So you could have something like first name, and we see that that shows up. That shows up pretty nicely. So we've got the first name, so it indicates what type of content we're expecting here. We can also put a line break here, so that puts the first name above the text field. Now the best way to do this is actually to use this as a label. So we have another element that we can create. We can call it label, and we indicate within label we have an attribute for, and this attribute will specify which input field this label is going to be for. So we just name it, use the name of the input field that we're going to be utilizing to tie it together, and then within that label, this is where we can add in the first name. So by default the label really doesn't do a whole lot, but one of the things that you will notice when you do click on the label, that it automatically focuses the input, so that flashing line there right within that input field that we're specifying. I'm going to get rid of the placeholder here so we can see that a little bit better. So we see when I click the label, it focuses on the input field. So this is probably the best way to go about it in order to indicate that you want specific content being placed within there. And then of course when it comes to styling, you can apply styling to it. Usually instead of paragraphs, I'll use divs, or we can use different formats as well. So I'm just using a div, and remember again we do have that styling here for the divs, so I am going to get rid of that just to indicate what we want our form to look like. So let's add in some additional options into our form. So every form is going to need a way actually to submit the form. And this is where we can add in buttons. So with buttons, there's different ways of adding in buttons. So we can add in a button as an input type. And also depending on how we're formatting our button, so with buttons you generally wouldn't need a label because this is going to be intuitive on what it's doing. We can specify the type as submit because this is going to be a submit button. We don't have to give it an ID or a name because this is going to be understood. We can assign a value that will give us special text within the button here on top of the button. So click me or something like that. And then this is all we need to do in order to create a button. So now it's understood that whenever this gets clicked, we're actually submitting the form. And we see over here that we've got within the URI, we get this question mark shows up. It's got first name, so it's taking the name value here from name and it's giving it equal to. So if I type in something like test, we see that the first name is equal to test now. And this is just that it is passing over that data using the URI. So there are different ways to specify how we pass over data as well. And these are attributes within the form as well. So we have some attributes where we can set up and specify a method that we want to use. So between the methods, we have an option of get and post. So get is the default. So what we see here, this is a get method. So when I refresh it, I type in something there, this is get. Now post is going to be more secure. So it's meant for post, sending over more secure data. And you'll see that we're just posting to this value and we're not actually including it in the URI anymore. And this is a more secure way of posting values from the form. So if you want values that can't be hijacked here in the URI, you should be using post to do your posts. So I'm going to change this back to get. We can also specify where we want to send the form to. So right now by default it's just sending it to the about page, but we could just as easily do action and we can specify a URI where we want to submit it to. So if we have a file, like let's say we had a PHP file that was just called submit, and if I refresh this, so now if I type in something here and we submit it, it's going to go over to the submit file, and it's still using get right now, so cannot get submit because this file actually doesn't exist. But we see that we do have the ability to send over that data via different methods, and we can also send to different URIs. So in the next lesson, we're going to take a deeper look at the different types of form options that we have, field options, because as we know, there's a lot of different ways to access and send information, to present information to users, and I'm going to be showing you those in the upcoming lesson.